I'm Jim Shaw, publisher of the Lexington Times and chair of the board of LexMedia. We're here with another edition of Coffee with the Candidates. I'm really pleased to be here with Tina McBride, who, as it turns out, we know each other we know each other through other people.
From way back.
From way back, from my brothers. You grew up here in Lexington. You're a Lexington native. Left and then came back. You loved it so much you wanted to come back. So we're glad you did.
Thanks.
But as it turns out, it's interesting. So we probably, and I have to apologize. You know my siblings, so I'm going to say I'm sorry right at the outset. I'm just kidding.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But anyway, it's great to see you out here, and I welcome you here to this conversation. These conversations just give us a chance to really learn more about the candidates who are running. And I've been starting off these conversations, which was kind of a simple thing. Why are you running and why is this so important to you? You're running for the planning board. I should establish that. Yes.
I'm running for the planning board. I have to say that I moved back in 2000. Obviously, I love Lexington. I grew up here and really think it's a great place to be from. So I dragged my husband back. My kids have been all through the school system. And when you've been here for such a long time, as you know, there's been a lot of change in Lexington. Some of it fantastic, some of it not so fantastic. And I think I first started being interested in planning board activities when I guess shortly after we got here, I noticed that a lot of smaller homes are being demolished. And I got involved with some people that also shared some of the same concerns, watching these small homes all get knocked down. These are all starter homes, tiny homes being replaced with houses that at first were like 2 times the size and then 3 times the size. But it occurred to me that, growing up here, there was a lot more economic diversity. And that was being kind of whinnied away with every small house that was getting knocked down. Fewer and fewer people could see Lexington as an option. My parents came here for the schools in '57. And it's been a boon for my family. My siblings, we all have higher educations, went on, a number of us have master's degrees, and it's just a good place to kind of set that trajectory. Right.
We did just, several years ago when the whole concept of the demolishing the homes started, we did a series in the Lexington Times, Colonial Times at the time, but Laurie, my wife, had written a piece, "Is this the Lexington we want?" And she really went out there and she took pictures of the homes and the before and the afters, and I hate to say that there was a resounding apparently yes, because it just continued and grew from there. Because like you, I watched these houses come down. And like you, I grew up in a relatively small home, very tight quarters.
Very tight.
And it was, but we didn't have any less love in our home. And it was I had a very great childhood, and I was really, I think about it fondly. But this is what they call, growth or what have you, evolution, or, these are the way these things evolve over time. People want to come to Lexington. They want bigger homes. They want, newer facilities and all of that. So at any rate, there you go. We tried to address it way back when, around 2000, I think it was, when we did that series. But here it is. It's here, and now it's here in a big way. So I'm glad somebody's at least paying attention to it.
Well, interestingly, you say that people want bigger and bigger homes, because, the reality, so in 2015, it was me and a team of really, really great numbers people, which I'm not. But they were crunching the numbers, and we realized that between 80 and 100 houses were coming down every year. Right. And the houses that were that were replacing them were much bigger, but I don't necessarily think that meant that there were people that didn't want smaller homes.
Right. Oh, there's
I mean,
no
if
question.
you wanted to move to Lexington,
Right.
it became farther and farther outside of your realm of possibility with every teardown because they were getting bigger and bigger and more expensive.
And the other thing too is that any of those houses, those smaller houses, were going right to the builders, so they were bypassing the market for the most part. So the opportunities were just sort of weren't there.
Exactly. And often, like, even if the town were in a position to purchase a home and, bring it into their affordable inventory, they couldn't compete with the speed at which the builders were snatching them and knocking them down.
And the town, and there's a little bit of, on the town at the time, and I'm not talking about the current leaders of Lexington, but they liked the additional revenue. You take a $300,000 house down and you turn it into a $700,000 house, and you're increasing the available tax revenue.
Right, but you're also decreasing the diversity, the demographic diversity, economic diversity in Lexington.
Right. If you look at the 2020 study, there's a plank on economic diversity. It's not just, it's there. I think they forgot it was there.
Right.
But, that's kind of one of my pet peeves, having grown up here. Right. Of course, I say that, very carefully because, in my publication, people can say, oh, you sell a lot of real estate advertising. Well, yeah, I do, but that's where the market is. And thank God I do, because I wouldn't be able to get this newspaper out if I didn't have the advertising base. So it kind of cuts both ways. And I just say that just sort of in full candor.
Absolutely, it cuts both ways. I mean, the reality is we do need more commercial tax revenues, but it's not necessarily...
And we're working on that.
Housing is not necessarily the only way we can achieve that. It's, we can get it through businesses, but it does cut both ways, and it's like everything else on the planet.
Right.
You have to come at things from two different directions. Right. There is no one side to any story. And I think that anytime there's anything new coming down the pike, you are going to get different opinions. And the trick is always to manage the balance and find a place where people can agree on stuff.
Right. And we are working towards, I was talking with somebody the other day in an earlier conversation about 440 Bedford Street, I guess. It's the big, huge, I think it's going to be the biggest building in Lexington when it's completed. And it is, it's a sight to see, there's no doubt. And, it answers the call when people say, we need to generate more, tax revenue from commercial enterprises and commercial, real estate. We're doing that, and then and again we hear from people. Well, it's going to create more demand on traffic, and we're going to have to deal with road infrastructure, and But the fact is, we have very limited places where we can develop commercial real estate, and so these things have to move forward if we're going to bring any kind of relief to the residential ratepayer. And I know that there's a lot of focus on Hartwell Ave, and we can talk a little bit about this, because I'm hoping to have a sort of well-balanced approach, a conversation about a balanced approach to building in Lexington. So and it all goes hand in glove, if you will, with the changes they've made last year in town meeting on they're no longer requiring the special permit for more densely populated, more dense construction.
Like the cluster housing. Things like that.
And then, of course, and then next to that, or parallel to that, is the village overlays that are out there. So, I mean, that does address the need, but people are kind of picking it apart the way it's done. It's not done. It was done fast rather than good, and that they're going back to readjust it. But I think everybody agrees we needed to do something about housing and create a more dense, more housing opportunities in Lexington, which on the surface says, we have to create more housing, and that's going to create more density. So why don't we talk a little bit about that? So your thoughts on what came out of town meeting last year, and how do you see it going forward?
So there was so much going on last year. I recognize we have a horrible housing shortage, not just here, not just Lexington, not just the state, nationally, terrible housing shortage. And it's hard to it's hard to balance that with, smaller homes, less square footage per person, to larger homes, more square footage per person. So it doesn't it doesn't translate well for me.
Right.
I agree. We need way more affordable housing in Lexington. What we were just talking about, the diversity ratios diminishing over the last 30, 40 years.
Right.
The problem is that Article 33 and 34 didn't relieve or address that issue at all. The MBTA communities that passed with the village overlays, part of the argument was, well, the state is requiring 10% affordable or inclusionary housing, but we are going to ask for 15% in Lexington. Well, we asked, and the state said, no, you have to leave it at 10%. So we've passed this.
Weren't we already at 10% prior to that?
What we had,
Right,
yes.
right.
Yes. But I mean, as far as requiring for new building.
For new building, okay. Yeah.
They wanted to, because we were going to commit a number of acres to the MBTA Communities Act,
Right.
we wanted to ask for 15% instead of 10%.
Right.
And the state came back and said, no, you can't ask for more than 10%. And I understand the reasoning. The reasoning was that their argument is that if you make a higher demand on affordable, then that really means you don't want affordable and you're just trying to make it difficult.
Right.
But the reality is that we want more affordable. Most people in Lexington do want more than that. And one of the reasons is that otherwise you open yourself up for an unfriendly 40B development, right? If you fall down below 10%.
Right. No, that's not. And we have one or two 40B developments in the community. One of them I just think is awful, and I'll just say it's off of Lowell Street, and it looks like, I call it the movie set because it looks like a movie set.
It does look a little like a movie set.
But that's what you're right. But if that's what you end up with, the 40 people don't understand. It's a 40B comprehensive state permit that allows you to forego, you bypass all of the permitting requirements in Lexington.
So beyond the threat of 40B, we have a moral obligation.
Right.
We need more.
Right.
We need more affordable housing.
Right.
We need affordable. We need inclusionary. We need workforce housing. We need housing for seniors.
Right. Options for seniors who want to downsize and don't necessarily want to move into an assisted living situation that's going to cost a significant amount of money. We
know that they do.
Right, and we have a couple of options here in Lexington. And full disclosure, I'm on the board at Brookhaven, but I think Brookhaven has kept. They have an interesting model where you invest into Brookhaven, and your family, when you're done at Brookhaven, your family gets 90% of that money back. So it's not like you're just putting it all out there. But there are other options out there where they're paying significant, like $9,000 rent, and on top of that, the cost of monthly maintenance and health care and services, and
there aren't just enough options for seniors.
And that's not affordable.
No.
Particularly for young people. Older folks who are selling their home because they can't afford to even keep up with the taxes because the value of their homes have gone up.
Well, we do have programs for that in Lexington.
Right.
Apparently,
programs
and they're not engaged at a very high rate either. So there are more things that people can do.
I want to keep focused on the on the things that you'll deal with as a member of the planning board. So dealing with this housing, dealing with the commercial stuff that needs to take place so that we actually do have a greater revenue stream coming out of our commercial property base. So what are some of your thoughts about how to achieve those things? And and I know that you're one of the issues near and dearest to you is the issue of sustainability. You've been an active. We've actually, we negotiated back when I was chair of the Chamber of Commerce before, when you were coming up, and we were trying to find a way to make it work. Because I think in principle we supported what you were doing, the chamber that is, but we had member businesses. People don't understand companies like Wilson Farm. They buy buy 2-3 years in bags, and they store them because they get volume discounts. So you guys were really amenable to actually sort of negotiating a time frame by which it could be phased in. And you weren't just like, it's got to start today and that's it. So I appreciate that flexibility.
Well, the plastic bags were an inspiration for us. Our attempt was for plastic straws,
right,
and for number 6.
Right.
We wanted to do
number 6 recyclables.
All number 6 plastic.
Right.
But we were in the negotiation. We decided just to keep it at EPS, the expanded polystyrene, like the styrofoam.
The styrofoam, which nobody should be using.
We can't recycle it. It has little chasing arrows on it. It's a lie. It doesn't get recycled. It gets burned. We burn all of our waste in Lexington. Our incinerator up in North Andover, right next to Lawrence, an environmental justice community.
Right.
All of our pollution blows.
I've always tried to get somebody to answer the question. We sort our recyclables in one, and we do the trash in the other. But then I was always told that it all ends up in the same place. And I don't know if that's specifically true, and I may be showing my lack of real knowledge on it.
No, you're showing the confusion.
The confusion, right?
It's very confusing.
Yeah.
And I think that it has changed dramatically as well, because when we shipped it all overseas, we would ship everything that had a little chasing arrows on it.
Right.
We'd ship it overseas, and then it got to the point where they were like, "Yeah, it's not cost effective to recycle all of these things."
Right.
So we had to start doing it ourselves.
And then we're just passing it off to another country. We're shirking our responsibility.
And they said, "No, thank you."
Right.
But it's very difficult to recycle plastics.
Right.
And typically, even if we do recycle a particular plastic, typically it gets recycled once,
right,
and it gets downcycled.
Right.
It would be great if we could just find other alternatives.
Right.
But that was when we first started talking about this.
Right.
We were kind of reintroduced
with the Girl Scouts, I might add,
Yes.
too, which I really was nice to see them involved. So.
They were awesome. They were awesome. They have an understanding, and I think a lot of it, and I think it's a little bit like what we see with planning. Often you get resistance to change.
Right.
Well, kids are younger, they've had less years to get kind of stuck in their ways.
Right.
They're more elastic in their brain, and they move on faster, and they engage in new ideas more easily, and they understand.
What kind of new ideas do you see for the planning board? I mean, obviously you want to offer something different than the status quo, and what would that be?
A few things. Well, first of all, you had asked about commercial properties. Right. In 2019, we were promised from the planning board that they were going to come back with the HIP. Do you remember HIP? The Hartwell Innovation Park?
Oh, right, exactly, yes.
And they had these amazing pictures of these community spaces and green, lush ideas, and everybody loved it. What was there not to love? I mean, it was great planning, beautiful, and that kind of disappeared. We spent time and resources developing those ideas, the planning board and the planning staff.
By the way, the second run at that, because years before that, we also spent a great deal of time and energy on changing the floor area ratio, the FAR, along Hanscom, and sort of removing setbacks and all of this with trying to encourage the landowners there, the property owners, to build up and add some other, draws into Hartwell services and other things. What you're talking about, the HIP, was sort of an extension of that. So talking about multi-use zoning and all of that too. So but there were two initiatives that just kind of seemed to go stagnant.
Yeah, well, the 2019, the relaxing of the dimensional controls, that concerned me because it seemed like it wasn't a completely thought out idea.
Right.
We were talking about letting the builders increase the footprints and building right up the street, but I felt like it really didn't address what we're going to have to deal with is, anytime you have increased density, you're going to have increased congestion. There's going to be a lot more traffic. And what was the plan? It didn't seem like the plan was done. I'm on the Hartwell Bedford 25% design working group, and there's so much more to be done with it. And they're still drawing schematics, and if you've got buildings that have started moving into the center and you don't have an idea yet as to what your streetscape is going to look like, that was concerning to me. I felt like it had to be more of it's an overused way to describe it, but more of a holistic design idea.
Right. And I remember going to a meeting over at Hartwell Avenue with Michael Keneally. He was Secretary of Economic Affairs at the time. And we were talking about, the jug handle on Hartwell Avenue. And that needs to be addressed. And then it always seems to be put off. And you can't have one without that, It's just because the way that the traffic moves around there is just. So anyway, but
it's pivotal
one issue.
Design.
You solve one problem, and then you've got another problem coming up behind. So But do you see a way forward on that?
Absolutely. I think that's part of planning. Good planning, right?
There you go.
You look at everything. You see, like 440 right now, the building that you mentioned earlier. We have to see what's good about this, what's bad about this, what can be better. It has to be not huge jumps in planning, but each of the points have to be touched on, and things can be addressed. But it has to be constant assessment. You have to have analysis going all the time to see what's happening, what's working, what's not, and changes that are outside of Lexington that are going to affect what's happening here. And I do think that's a possibility. I mean, it has to be. I don't have to be the expert. Right. I don't. Oh, I'm sorry. I just touched my
microphone.
Microphone.
Yeah.
I don't have to be the expert. Planning staff. That's what we have. Competent, trained planning staff. We're supposed to be using the guide of like the comprehensive plan and what Lexington wants to guide them and ask them, what are the details? What does the data show us? And how can we make those changes in a positive way that's going to help everybody? Right.
Okay. And this is something you've been thinking about for a while. I mean, I know you've been active in the community on a lot of fronts, most more specifically like on sustainability issues. But still, you're a well-rounded candidate. Would you say that? I mean, for critics who might say, well, she's really interested in sustainability, but what else is there, But from what I hear, you're out there, you're talking about all of these issues, you're aware of what's going on, and you aren't, from my perspective, I'm not sure that you're a single issue candidate.
No. So when I graduated from high school, I backpacked around Europe. I've lived in multiple different cities. I got my degree, my BA in anthropology from Columbia University. I've touched on a whole bunch of different things. And again, I really have the philosophy that there's no one thing by itself. Everything touches everything else. Right. The 2015 demolition delay extension that I tried failed. Thank goodness Robert Rotberg did his own demolition delay extension, passed last year. Hooray. I was part of the group that did the NCD, the Neighborhood Conservation District in Turning Mill. I'm now on the commission there. Okay. And I've argued for and against a number of bylaws since that time. I've been following the planning board since 2013, and so I have a sense of what's happening there. It took me a long time to decide to do it.
Right. It's not an easy thing to decide to put your name on the ballot. Yeah. People often talk about, I could do that, or but they don't offer themselves up. So I give you a lot of credit for stepping up and saying, I have some ideas, and I'm passionate about this, and And here it is. This is the time this is where the rubber meets the road.
Well, like you said, sustainability is definitely one of my big issues.
Right.
Particularly how climate change affects Black and brown people disproportionately. But also, I mean, like I said, I've lived in cities all over the world and all over the U.S. and not all over the U.S.
I get it,
mostly just the Northeast. But
right.
you know, I've been my first apartment outside of leaving home was in East Boston.
Okay.
That was a big culture shock. But I've lived in the North End and the South End. I lived in Detroit and seen the blight of white flight out of the city of Detroit. I've lived in Harlem. I've lived in the West Village. All these different cities, and you can see in each of these cities the different approach, and how planning can really affect people's lives.
Right.
How they live, quality of life, what they're seeing every day,
Right.
the experience that they have. So
Great. We have to start winding down. So I don't know if there's anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to mention. If not, I know we did cover a whole lot of things in sort of in a conversational way, which is the way I always like this program to go, because you can really learn a lot by, instead of somebody firing questions at you, because we're really sort of hearing from your mind, your heart, what's really important to you. As we close out, though, I want to let people know where they can learn more about you. Your website.
Yep.
I know we were talking with Sonny, was like Sonny for Lexington, for the school committee race, but people have to know how to spell Sonny and all this stuff. So is it Tina McBride?
it's Tina McBride Lex.
Tina McBride Lex at .org. Tina McBride Lex.org.
Yeah,
okay.
you might have to do the www in the front as well.
Okay. Yes. I didn't know where some of it you do, some of you don't. But I always do it anyway, because
Right.
you're not gonna. You're not going to go wrong. At least you'll get there.
Right.
So anyway.
So yeah, I think that one of the first things I do want to address is finding a better vehicle for affordable and inclusionary housing
Okay.
in Lexington.
And we're moving in that direction. Something that that makes sense for the whole community. Well, good. Well, I want to thank you for coming here today. It's been a long day. We've done a whole bunch of these, but.
We've been
like
doing
I say,
it for hours.
we always say save the best for last, right? So, but we were really glad you could come, and I really do wish you the best in the election.
Thank you very much.
I know you're working hard. When I spoke with you yesterday, you were out there, stumping out there, getting literature out to folks to learn more about you. So, anyway, win, lose or draw, at least you worked hard at this thing, and either way, I know you're not going anywhere. So.
No,
Yeah.
I'm here for the long haul.
Good. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure.